Thank you. Yeah, regarding 1.6 million acres, I have a little bit of help. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. And I just wanted to share here this afternoon some post-fire monitoring work at a Shasta snow-wreath population that we did just here this past year. Okay, keep going. All right, so I'm going to start off by summarizing Shasta snow-wreath for those that may not be familiar. Talk a little bit about the Hirz Fire, which a number of us mentioned yesterday. Talk a little bit about a specific population of snow-wreath that burned in this fire. Also summarize then some of the post-wildfire observations, and then hopefully, sticking with the session theme, we'll have some good news. I can share right now some good news that I know it's been a long couple of days, so we have no graphs, no tables, no statistics, very little data, certainly no dendrograms or genetic things to describe, so this should just be a nice, easy-going story. This is really for my benefit, not anybody else's. Being selfish there. So Shasta snow-wreath is a deciduous shrub in the Rosaceae. It's been a while now, funny doing the math, but it's still a relatively recent discovery back in 1992. And when it was originally discovered, it was thought to be a limestone associate, and subsequently it was found in a number of non-limestone habitats. But in either case, it's endemic to a very small portion of what's known as the southeastern Klamath Mountains. So by that, we're talking about this area here, just this mountainous region north of Redding. So we're down here in Chico. Here's Redding, Whiskey Town Reservoir, which was talked about some of the fire stuff yesterday. Here's Trinity Lake, here's Shasta Lake. And we're really talking about this general area, the lower watersheds feeding Shasta Lake. So if we zoom in a little bit closer to the snow-wreath occurrences, you can see here's Redding and I-5, 299 East. So here's Shasta Dam, and the lake is made up of the Sacramento River arm, McCloud River arm, the Squaw Creek arm, and then the Pitt River arm. Most all these occurrences, as you can tell, are either around the lake itself or in the little subwatersheds tributary to the lake. And then there's a couple sites, this guy here and these here, that are actually in the Cow Creek watershed, which connect onto down to the Sacramento River downstream. But anyway, this is the southeasternmost portion of the southeastern Klamath Mountains. So ever since the species was discovered, it's been ranked as a 1B. It's also been a Forest Service and BLM sensitive species for a number of years as well. And most recently, here just this last fall, there were listing petitions submitted to the California Fish and Game Commission and the Fish and Wildlife Service for listing under the State and Federal Endangered Species Act. Those petitions are currently under review. So it's the plant's known to reproduce vegetatively. Most of the occurrences form these really dense thickets of stems. A number of occurrences you'll find individual shrubs or a little bit more of a clustered distribution, but for the most part it's these dense thickets of stems. And some genetic work using isozymes back in 2012, at that time it was most of the known sites showed low genetic diversity within and among those populations. The flowers do produce achenes, but tying to the pollination stuff earlier, there's nothing known about pollination for this thing. There's never really been anyone that's seen any pattern with anybody using the flowers, and with that, there's never been any viable seed or seedlings collected or observed in any of these populations. So suspicion is suggesting that it's maybe sterile. There's one other species in the genus, Alabama snow-wreath, which is found in 5 southeastern U.S. states, and within its range, it's also highly restricted. Known, despite being in horticultural trade there, it's in wild, it's only known for vegetative reproduction, and is also thought to have low seed viability or even be sterile. So if you look at a number of the Shasta snow-wreath occurrences, there's some clues, at least, to offer up what may happen with either natural or disturbance or management, or what has happened as a result of those activities. There are 4 sites that have had selective logging previously. A number of sites have old trails, large dirt roads that have gone through them over the years, and where the plants have crept back into the road cut and even into the road surface. There's a well-known population with a hiking trail that was built right through the middle of it before anybody even knew what the thing was, and that trail was also used as a fire break for a prescribed fire the Forest Service did up in this particular area. And another small project the Forest Service did was down here at a place called Jones Valley. It's there's a very small, light, understory burn, and there was a lot of debate at the time, but they did throw in a couple of individual shrubs into the project, and those shrubs did indeed sprout. So there's these little clues out there that might suggest what a population of this thing might do in the event of larger disturbance. Well, we've talked about these quite a bit yesterday, but the Hirz Fire, which is this guy here, is part of what ended up being 3 fires that were all connected just north of the Redding area, so everything's going to be off the map here to the south. But this is the north end of the Carr Fire, and then after that, the Hirz Fire started, and then shortly thereafter, the Delta Fire, and by the end, they were all basically connected at some points. So this was already going in July, and this guy started here a little bit later in August. So because the Carr Fire wasn't tragic enough, one of Shasta County's finest decides to steal a car, drive on Gilman Road on the rims, and starts the fire. Probably not that crackhead, but that's an internet crackhead. But you get the idea. So the Gilman Road is here from I-5, and it's the main road that goes along the side here. Pretty sad. So it started the 9th of August, was contained about mid-September. It burned about 46,000 acres when it was all said and done. And we had high, low, medium burn intensity, depending on your location, and areas as well that it did not burn. So it was a real patchwork. Also within the Hirz Fire were 2 Shasta snow-wreath occurrences. This northernmost one here called Ellery Creek, and the southern one I call south of Ellery Creek because it occurs in an unnamed drainage south of Ellery Creek, so that's its name. But both of these burned. Ellery Creek completely burned, and the one south of Ellery Creek, basically about 99.9%. There's a few shrubs in there, but it was a few of them left. But basically, it was also burned. So interesting. The Klamath Mountains, including the southeastern Klamath Mountains, which is the area we're talking about for the snow-wreath range, did burn historically, frequently. But oddly enough, there's been a couple of close calls, but since the species has been discovered, it's never burned. So one thing that the Hirz Fire did do is at least provide an opportunity to see what this thing does after a large wildfire event. So we focused this work then on the Ellery Creek population. Again, there were the 2 of them there. The Ellery Creek site's about 28 acres. It's quite large. So these plants are spread out over 28 acres, and there's hardwood conifer, hardwood, and chaparral habitats within that area where the plants exist. So about a month after the fire was out and the area was cleared and you can get in there, we just went in and established an informal transect. The design was simply just to cover the occurrence and kind of be able to walk through each of those 3 habitat types that were out there and make basic observations of, including sprouting or whatever you're seeing, any seedlings, the health, any other ecological factors such as browsing or disease. This is the occurrence a couple weeks after the fire. This is roughly the outline of the occurrence, and it goes off the photo here into the creek. This is the hardwood conifer habitat, ponderosa pine, a little bit of Doug fir, some black oak, and Canyon live oak. The hardwood stands over on this side, here, California black oak, the chaparral up here at the top, dominated by brewer oak, which is the shrub form of Oregon white oak. And then all that area, sorry. And this is all limestone habitat, so these are all limestone outcroppings here, all this gray stuff you're seeing. So again, the whole occurrence burned. At this site, it was all either medium or high burn severity, and it killed all the above ground snow-wreath stems. It basically just left root crowns or charred skeletons if there's anything left at all. And our monitoring, or if you will, kind of started about a month after when we established that transect. And first thing noticed there was that a lot of the other associated species were already starting to re-sprout. And there hadn't been any rain events or anything, but some of them were already going to town, which was really interesting. But Shasta snow-wreath was not. But digging up some of the roots and examining those, they did appear healthy. I mean, not having ever looked at snow-wreath roots before, but they did seem like they were in pretty decent shape and not where the fire hadn't gotten too deep into the soil. So, it just was at that point, it's like, well, let's wait and see what happens. And sure enough, first part of the following of March, the first growing season after all this happened, started to observe crown sprouting, and then also root sprouting that come off of all the runners the plant has. And by then they were already a couple inches tall. The sprouting continued clearing through April, became really, really, really dense, almost turf-like in some spots. And by June, they were upwards of 3 feet tall. That continued in through July, and typical for things in this area, the shrubs anyway. It gets hot and no water, so the growth started to wane, slowed down a bit. But nonetheless, it continued clear into October. The sprouts reached about 3.5 feet tall, and by then there was a couple of rain showers and some cooler overnight lows. So a lot of times, snow-wreath and the shrubs in that area, they'll put on a little bud growth or a little new leaf growth in response to the moisture. So it just kind of suggested that this occurrence was behaving normal, if you will, compared to other ones. So in conclusion, I mean the occurrence, both occurrences, let's talk about Ellery Creek, but both occurrences are extant. They seem like they're in good condition. They're obviously characterized by dense vegetative resprouting, and there was no flowering, very limited browsing, no issues there. Any browsing observed was just right along where a game trail was, where a deer might pick an individual plant or two. No signs of pathogens or disease. This is the big one. No seedlings were observed. So if you consider that fire is by far the most common significant disturbance thing out in the range of this plant, and this whole thing burned, and you didn't get that seedling response, so it begs the question, well, what's going to do it? And the answer is probably nothing. We're kind of thinking that this thing's probably going to be limited, or is limited rather, to vegetative reproduction. So that's interesting in its own right, and has some management implications as well. So full disclosure, about almost a year ago now, so we were starting to do this, word got out, and I was contacted to see if I was interested in giving a talk and providing the results. And at the time, we were seeing this. This is a snow-wreath sprout, and there's all these little guys mixed in, and we're like super jazzed. Oh, he's supposed to be faster. Okay, so we were stoked. I mean, we're like, yes, we got cool things to talk about. Julie and I were running up on weekends to see this thing because we didn't want to miss out when these little guys came up, and sent pictures to Dean, and all he says is, "Why did you wake me up in the middle of the night? Oh my gosh, this is huge. You'd make me wait till the next morning." And I'm like, that'd be kind of weird. But anyway, it was a big deal, and we were really excited that we'd finally be able to document Neviusia seedlings. So that went along a little bit longer, and then some of these, you can see a couple cohorts here. This is a snowy sprout here to compare. And some of these older seedlings started to look a little weird, kind of a little buttercuppy looking, and opposite leaves. And, well, maybe we got a little too excited. And of course, by then we committed to the talk and all that. So by then, or a little bit later on, it turns into this guy, and so we were really sad. I like Klamath as much as the next guy, but it's not snowy. So anyway, the other cool things, though, we did get to report the resprouting and how it did respond to the fire. So there is certainly some good news to take from that. There's a number of other southeastern Klamath endemics, 3 of which occur at this site as well. Shasta fawn lily, Shasta lampstone monkey flower, and Lane's Shasta maidenhair fern. All 3 of these things came through just fine. The fawn lily didn't even know what happened. I don't think the Eranthri did either. It's tucked away in all the nooks and crannies and rocks. And the maidenhair fern also came out just fine. It also, like the snow-wreath, burned completely out of, and it was covering that hillside I showed you in that picture. There was a lot of it, completely burned, but it popped back. But what was interesting is it was a very slow, metered resprouting versus the big profusion that a lot of the other things had. So with that, shameless plug, we did submit, and we have a note going into a special issue of California Fish and Game that's going to do a little plant-centric issue. And then looked for that this spring, and I think I might have time for questions. Thank you.